Let my bride friend down, burst her dream of a free wedding by pointing out the costs and burdens she expected us to bear. I'm 24 years old and part of a close-knit friend group. One member, Coral, she's 23, just got engaged to her fiancé, who's 25. When she first announced her engagement a few weeks ago, we were all thrilled for her. Coral was glowing, and her excitement was contagious. But everything started to unravel last weekend when Coral revealed her plans for the wedding. She told us she'd been inspired by those free wedding trends she'd seen all over TikTok and Instagram, couples managing to spend absolutely nothing on their celebrations, except maybe for the marriage certificate. At first, I assumed she meant they'd go for a no-frills city hall ceremony, which I thought sounded perfectly nice. But then Coral started laying out her vision, and that's when the alarm bells started ringing. Her plan was to track down someone generous enough to donate a big outdoor space, nothing fancy, just someone's yard or field, not a real wedding venue. She expected every guest to bring a dish, but not casually. She was already assigning specific foods for the potluck. She had roped in friends to officiate, do the photography, design the invitations, and even handle the flowers. Her family would chip in with decor, maybe someone would scrounge up a large tent, set up speakers, coordinate a band, put together wedding favors, all you can imagine. I couldn't believe it. She was even expecting someone to get a band for free. I wasn't sure what her plan was for her dress, maybe a hand-me-down or borrowing from someone else? It all sounded wildly ambitious. The thing is, Coral and her fiancé aren't struggling financially. She has a good job as an accountant at a big company, and her fiancé is in software sales. Plus, his parents are absolutely loaded. From everything I can tell, it's not a case of needing to save money, they just want to prove they could have a zero-spend wedding, like it's a challenge. At first, I thought maybe it wouldn't affect me directly. But then Coral came to me specifically and asked if I could make the wedding cake. She sent over Pinterest-worthy inspiration photos, multi-tiered cakes covered in intricate fondant flowers, gilded with gold leaf, one with a stunning hand-painted watercolor design. I just stared at my phone, half laughing, half horrified. I like to bake, sure, I make cookies and brownies for our group sometimes, but nobody would mistake me for a professional baker. I told her flat out that recreating cakes like that would probably take me several days, and in the end, they'd never look anything like her dream cakes. Coral only laughed it off and told me, "Oh, it's not about being perfect. I just want everyone to pitch in. It'll be fun." But the more she spoke, the more frustrated I felt. It was obvious that her free wedding was really just shifting all the cost, work, and stress onto her friends and family, some of whom don't have as much money as she does. I told her, as gently as I could, that her plans were basically making her free day possible only because the rest of us would absorb the burden of money, time, and labor. Or else, if everyone decided not to go all in with her wishes, she'd end up with a lackluster event and expect us all to act like it was amazing anyway. Honestly, the whole thing felt like a bad group project. None of us wanted to do the work, and Coral's the youngest, so she still feels like she has something to prove. I bluntly told her that if she really wanted a free wedding, she should just elope or stick to City Hall, because this plan wasn't actually free, it was just free for her. I may have been a bit forceful with how I said it, but I never swore or insulted her. Still, the minute I said it, Coral went completely silent, just staring at me. Then she got up and left, with another friend quietly offering her a ride home. That night, I got a text from that same friend, saying I'd really hurt Coral's feelings. Even if her plan was a little out there, I should have just let her see for herself that it wouldn't work, instead of confronting her so directly. A little later, Coral messaged me herself, just a short, "Sorry, don't worry about the cake," with no other explanation. Now I can't shake the guilt. Coral is honestly the sweetest person, if a little naive. She was so excited and never said a harsh word to me, and now I feel like I've crushed some of that joy with my frustration. Maybe I should have just agreed to try making the cake. She did say she wouldn't be mad if it turned out badly, but I just kept picturing her being disappointed on a day that's supposed to be so special. I know I got frustrated and let it out more harshly than I meant, especially since Coral has always been the baby of our group. I'm just tired of feeling like I have to shoulder someone else's group project when the stakes are her own wedding. I don't even know what her fiancé thinks of all of it, but part of me worries that in trying to be honest, I just ended up stamping out Coral's happiness. Update 1. My friend Coral stunned everyone when she announced her plan for a free wedding. Every one of her friends would volunteer their talents to pull off a celebration that looked anything but cheap. She envisioned a gorgeous venue, a big tent, amazing food, professional quality photography, a lively band, and, as my role, an incredible cake. At first, it sounded fine, quirky, maybe even special, but the more Coral described her expectations, the more unrealistic and extravagant they seemed. I couldn't keep it to myself. In a moment of honesty, probably a little too blunt, I told her what I really thought, and she got seriously upset. But the more I thought about it afterwards, the guiltier I felt. Coral really isn't some entitled monster. She's genuinely kind, sometimes a bit scattered, but she means well. Maybe I'd come down too hard on her. So, I decided I would make the cake, after all. I sent her a heartfelt apology, but she didn't respond. Anxiety gnawed at me, and my mind ran wild. Had I ruined our friendship? Was she now ashamed, or feeling betrayed? I tried to prepare myself for a conversation where I'd have to eat crow. But out of nowhere, Coral's fiancé, we'll call him Basil, reached out and wanted to meet up. I braced myself, expecting Basil to rebuke me for hurting Coral or meddling in their celebration. I even brought along some cake ideas to smooth things over. But when I sat down with Basil, I got blindsided. The free wedding wasn't Coral's idea at all, it was his. He was surprisingly candid about it, especially when I pushed for more details. Apparently, this entire plan was so he could spend the money they'd painstakingly saved for their wedding on something else, a boat, specifically a Catalina 27. Right, a boat. In the city. And get this, Coral gets seasick. I know, because we once went on a river cruise all together, and she had a legitimately terrible time. Basil brushed that off, saying she just needed to get over it and that sailboats are totally different. Sure. Very practical. Meanwhile, my run-in with Basil gave me a weird feeling. He wants me to be the middleman, to go talk to Coral, apologize, again, and try to convince her that this whole arrangement is a great idea. According to him, I apparently owe him for causing such a mess. But I'm stuck. There's no way I can lie to Coral and act like I suddenly believe in this plan. That just feels wrong, especially since the cracks in their relationship, and the wedding plans, are obvious now. Telling her the truth, though, and voicing my concerns about Basil and the marriage itself, could unleash even more drama. I see the pressure she's under. I can't shake the feeling that Basil is steering everything, and Coral just wants to keep the peace. Now, time is ticking. I need to act, whether it means echoing Basil's message like a puppet, or risking everything by being the friend who speaks up. There's no easy choice. But as much as I want things to be simple, it's clear that this has become so much more than just baking a cake. Update 2. I didn't dance around it. I told her I met Basil. I told her about the boat. She went very still and then made this tiny, tired laugh I've only heard from her a few times, like she's trying to catch up to what's happening and can't. She said, "He told me you misunderstood," and then, like she couldn't help herself, she added, "He keeps saying it's not about a boat, it's about being smart." I asked her if she wanted it. The boat, the plan, any of it. She looked at her latte like it might answer for her and said, very quietly, "I don't even like standing on paddle boards." I thought that would be the end of it. But a few hours later, Basil dropped both of us into a group text with a link and a winky face. See trial on Saturday. Dress warm. You'll love her. Her. He booked a test sail without asking her. Coral texted me separately, "Please come with me. I don't want to go alone." Saturday was gray and gusty, the kind of March day that stings your ears and smells like wet pennies. The marina was a tangle of masts and clanging hardware, gulls screaming like they were in on the drama. A broker in a fleece vest shook our hands and said, "You must be Coral. Excited for your first look?" Basil beamed and did this arm around shoulder thing where it looks like affection until you notice he's steering her with it. The boat was smaller than I imagined and older. The inside smelled like diesel and damp wood. Basil kept saying words like beam and draft like he'd been saving them up, and the broker nodded along. "We put your deposit in escrow, so no rush, but the owners are eager," the broker said, casual as if he'd mentioned the weather. Coral flinched. "What deposit?" Basil didn't miss a beat. "Babe, it's just to hold it. Fully refundable." I watched her chew on that and swallow it back down. It got worse before it got better. At the dock, Basil popped his trunk to grab non-marking shoes for Coral. He'd thought of everything, and a long cardboard tube rolled forward and thunked against my shin. It had a sticker on it with a print proof peeking out. Curiosity got the best of me. Basil didn't seem to notice me nudge it upright. It was a vinyl decal, navy with a gold outline, in some jaunty nautical font that looked straight off Etsy, not a dime. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. Coral saw it, too. Her face went through disbelief, then this strange calm I didn't recognize. We went out anyway. The wind caught our hair and the boat tipped, and Basil grinned like he was plugging into an outlet. He kept saying, "Feel that? That's power, and you'll get your sea legs," while Coral went quiet in that heavy way that isn't actually quiet at all. The broker talked about hull surveys and mooring fees and a slip that might open up if we move fast. I passed Coral a ginger candy from my coat and she nodded, green around the edges. On the way back in, with gulls swooping and ropes squealing, the broker said, all cheerful, "You'll want to get the insurance binder lined up Monday if we're closing end of week." Basil said perfect, and then looked at Coral. "See? This is an asset. A wedding is just confetti." I don't know what I expected her to do, cry, scream, jump overboard. She tightened her life jacket and said, in a voice I had never heard from her, "I am not buying a boat I will not use with money we saved for a wedding I still want." We were standing on the dock when she said it. Basil laughed, this sharp, disbelieving sound, like she'd told a joke badly. "Coral. Be serious. Do you want to be like everyone else? Blow 30 grand on a day? Our boat will be paid off in." She cut him off. "Our boat?" There was a tiny, awful silence. The broker took one discreet step away. Back in the parking lot, the veneer completely slid off. Basil said he'd already moved the money temporarily, his word, because deals like this don't wait. Coral asked which account. He said, vaguely, "I've got it." She pulled out her phone, hands shaking, and opened her banking app. She scrolled. She scrolled again. Her jaw set. "You moved it from the joint," she said. "I manage it better," he said, like he'd done her a favor. "You're bad with logins." "I am not proud of this," but I said, "You've got a vinyl boat name in your trunk." Basil told me it was none of my business and asked if I was enjoying my little saboteur moment. Coral didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. She told him to text the broker and cancel the closing. He balked. She said, "Now," and he did, thumbs flying. Then she told him she was going to stay at her sister's for a few days and that there would be no wedding planning until the money was back and the boat nonsense was done. He started to say her friends were putting ideas in her head. She turned and looked at me, then back at him. "My friends aren't the ones naming a boat with my money." He tried, once more, to wrap it all up in charm. "You'll thank me later," he said. "You're just anxious." "I am," she said. "And I'm listening to it." She came home with me that night because her sister's spare room was full of moving boxes. We ate crackers and cheese for dinner and she fell asleep on my couch in her coat. In the morning, she woke up, called the bank, and asked them to flag the transfer. She called the broker herself and said she did not consent to any purchase and to release any deposit back to its original source. Then she called Basil and told him to give her the logins. He hemmed and hawed and said he'd handle it, and she said, very clearly, "I need to see it." In the weird quiet that followed, she started untangling her parts of their life like yarn. She put her own paycheck into a different account. She emailed HR to stop any auto transfers. She texted her mom and, later, had a long, low-voiced conversation with her that ended with, "Yes, I'm okay. No, I'm not hungry. Yes, I promise." By afternoon, his mother called her and said things like, "We just thought you two were being practical, and a nice dinner is just as valid," which told us exactly how Basil had framed everything. Coral said, politely, that she would not be discussing her wedding with anyone who thought calling it just confetti was romantic. And then, because of course, Basil showed up, vibrating with that brittle, righteous energy people get when they've already decided they're right. He apologized to me first, then pivoted to why he did what he did, and how the money was safer with him, and how Coral's seasickness was psychological and fixable. Coral stood there and let him talk and then said, "You stole from me," which made him sputter because he wanted a more forgiving word, like borrowed. He brought the ring into it. He wanted to make it a test. "If you don't trust me with this, maybe you don't trust me at all," he said. The logic of a trap. Coral took off the ring and put it on the table between them. Not dramatic, just a soft clink. "Right now I don't," she said. "Not with the wedding. Not with the money. Not with us." He looked at the ring like it might bite him, then looked at me and said, "You did this." I didn't say anything. He left without it. By evening, the broker had emailed, "Deposit returned, closing cancelled." The bank flagged the transfer as unauthorized and Basil texted a screenshot with a million red angry emojis. Coral blocked his number and then unblocked it because logistics, then blocked it again. She sent one message to our group chat, short and clear: "The wedding is postponed, she's sorry for the chaos, and thank you for the love." She told me she'll send separate messages to the people she'd already roped in, officiant friend, photographer friend, me, because she wanted, her words, to undo what she could. She isn't making any big proclamations yet about the engagement. She's sleeping in my guest room and making a spreadsheet labeled me, which made both of us laugh until we cried. She still loves Basil. People don't stop loving someone overnight just because the mask slipped. But she keeps touching the spot on her finger where the ring was, like she's checking her pulse, and then putting her hand down again. We walked along the river this afternoon because she wanted to see the water on purpose and in control. It was calmer than Saturday, bright and flat and glittery, and the tour boat that made her sick last year slid by full of tourists in ponchos. She watched it, then exhaled, long and slow. "It's not about boats," she said. "It's about whether my life is a group project he gets an A for." She turned to me and said, "No more potluck wedding. If I do this, I'm paying the caterer and the band and the photographer, and if I can't, then we'll go to City Hall and have pasta after and I will not apologize." Then she grinned and nudged me. "And you can make me a very ugly, very honest cake." So that's where it is. Not tied up with a bow, but not sinking either. Basil's vinyl letters are still in his trunk, for a boat that isn't his. The money is coming back. The wedding got very small, all at once. And Coral, who has always gone along because it's easier, is drawing lines you can't see on paper, but you can feel when you're standing next to her. It's not the update I thought I'd write when this started, but it's the one that makes sense. Update 3. We went back to their apartment on Monday with a trunk full of flat boxes and that hollow, practical feeling you get before a storm. Coral's sister met us there with coffee and a roll of garbage bags. She'd brought a tape gun like she was about to ship her grief somewhere with tracking. Basil had texted "Let's talk like adults" and then, 15 minutes later, "I'm home." When we walked in, he and his mother were sitting side by side on the couch like a team on a game show you don't want to be on. His mother had on pearls and the exact expression you wear when you're about to talk to a manager. Someone had opened a window and the place smelled like rain and cologne. The ring was still on the side table where Coral left it, catching the gray light in a way that made it look almost shy. Basil glanced at it and then straightened up like we were all about to rehearse the right version of events. "We can fix this," he said, which felt like he was offering to glue a plate back together and put it in a cabinet and never talk about the cracks. His mother started in on tone, hers and ours, and the sanctity of commitments and how couples have seasons. Basil said he'd call the bank as a courtesy. Coral asked if the money was back. He said, "It's in motion," like the phrase would make it real. Coral bent down, picked up the ring, and slipped it into the little velvet box it came in. She said she needed to insure it while it was still in her possession, and Basil said of course, as if he'd suggested it first, and then added, "You can put it back on after," because he could not add a string. I don't know what I thought the jeweler would be like, but I didn't expect the quiet and the soft carpet and the way all the lights were pointed like stage lights. A woman with a perfect bun and nails painted the exact color of milk guided us to a counter with a jeweler's pad and pulled a loop from her pocket. She looked once, then again. Her eyebrows did a small, polite climb. She asked if we had the paperwork. Coral had none. Basil had always joked he tossed the boring stuff. The woman flipped the ring on its side with tweezers and wrote 3 letters on a pad in neat block script, LGD. Coral stared. "That means what I think it means?" she asked. "Lab grown," the woman said, "kind, careful. Not a problem for a lot of people. In fact, it's very popular. But for insurance, we need it properly described." Coral didn't say anything for a beat, then gave this sound like a little door clicking shut. It wasn't about lab grown. She doesn't care about rocks grown under a mountain versus a machine. It was about how Basil had told everyone, loudly, that it was a natural stone, E-color, paid cash because she's worth it, and how he'd made it a line item in his speech. The woman looked at the setting again and then said, "Do you want me to check whether it's paid off? Sometimes there's a store account," and her voice was so gentle I wanted to hug her. Coral nodded. The woman disappeared into a back room with the ring while we looked at our reflections in 10 different shiny surfaces and tried not to breathe too loud. When she came back, she had a printout and a new expression that made me want to puke for Coral. "It looks like it's financed," she said. "Through a store card. The name on the application is Basil's, but he listed a joint address. There's a promotion ending next month. The remaining balance is..." She slid the paper across, upside down, like we were about to take a test. Coral turned it around and stared at the number. It wasn't giant. It wasn't tiny. It was exactly in the range that makes you tell a story about paying cash so you can feel like the hero of your own movie. Coral thanked the woman and asked for a written appraisal. We drove in silence to Basil's office because he'd texted we should do this face to face, not like hooligans. The building has a glass lobby with a succulent that cost more than my shoes. He met us downstairs with a bouquet that looked like prom and a smile like a gash. "You're overreacting," he said. "Everyone finances. Lab grown is the responsible choice. I didn't tell you because you're sentimental about stupid things." Coral took the bouquet and set it on the check-in desk like she was returning a library book. Then she set the little velvet box on top. She opened it and let him see what he'd said was priceless under retail lighting at 2 in the afternoon. "I am sentimental," she said. "About honesty. And about not being managed." She pushed the box across. He didn't reach for it. He tried to talk around it, how he'd found a better rate for the mooring, how his buddy's cousin would film their vows for free, how he'd emailed my employer about your behavior, news to me. He threw ideas like life preservers. Coral didn't pick any up. She told him they were done. Not paused, not let's think. She gave him the check from the bank for the return transfer, her name first, his second, and told him to deposit it and send her a screenshot when it was settled. He tried to make it about the ring again, like this was about materials science. She said, "It's about the way you make everything a debit I owe you." Then, because she's still Coral, she apologized to the receptionist for the scene. We walked out into a day that had decided to be spring for an hour, and I watched her shoulders drop half an inch. He didn't go quietly. He sent her a paragraph that read like a closing argument and then another that read like a love letter and then a third that read like a Yelp review of me. He called my phone twice and left one long voicemail in which he said confetti 7 times. He showed up at my building at 9 p.m. with a bouquet because he apparently forgot I have a downstairs neighbor who collects license plates and calls the cops for sport. The cops arrived, bored and polite. Basil did that thing where you try to charm a person whose night consists of being uncharmed professionally. He left with the flowers. We watched from my window and ate the last of the crackers. Overnight, the broker emailed again, this time to me, somehow, "Hope you ladies had a great experience Saturday. FYI, another buyer stepped in. Best of luck with your wedding planning." He added a smiley face. I'm still unpacking. 10 minutes later, an Instagram account with 13 posts and a single follower, Basil, DM'd Coral a story of a different boat gliding past sunset with the caption, "Assets confetti." She didn't reply. She blocked and then put her phone under a pillow like it might burn her hand. We spent yesterday in a way I recommend for heartbreak, irritating errands. Coral sat in a gray cubicle at the bank and closed the joint savings while a man with a tie pattern like Beatles tried to be smooth about it. She emailed HR again. She Googled apartments and found one with a terrible kitchen and a view of a parking lot that made her weirdly happy because no one has ever tried to sell a dream about parking lots. At my place, I pulled out mixing bowls because sometimes the only thing that makes sense is flour. We made the ugly cake she asked for. It listed to the left like a little drunk. We frosted it with a spatula that still had a burn mark from college and stuck a candy anchor on top with a slash through it. Coral piped not a dime across the middle and then laughed until she had to sit down because she was crying. Her phone buzzed this morning with a number she didn't recognize. It was a woman named Lacey who introduced herself as Basil's ex from before Coral, someone he'd never mentioned. She'd seen his tagged photo from a work thing last year and recognized his mom and did some social media triangulation that I don't want to know the logistics of. Her voice trembled just enough to make me sweep the table with my hand like I was clearing it for an emergency. She said, "I only called because I wish someone had told me," and then told us about a motorcycle and a smart plan and a summer she spent learning to be less dramatic about the smell of gasoline in her hair. She said the phrase financial seasoning, which I still hate. She texted receipts she didn't know us, a lease with only her name and a loan with his, and a series of messages where he spelled the word responsible wrong 3 times. It was like someone turned on another light in the same room. Coral thanked her. She didn't spiral. She just closed her eyes and breathed through it like a stitch. By lunch, the money had landed back where it belonged. By dinner, Basil had deleted his Instagram story and replaced it with a photo of a beer and a caption about good vibes only, which we both agreed was the universal sign for bad vibes. In fact, Coral sent a final, 5-sentence text that said he could pick up the rest of his things on Saturday between 10 and noon, and if he wanted the ring he could get it from the jeweler after he paid off the balance because she wasn't carrying his debt in a box in her purse. Then she booked a 90-minute appointment with a therapist whose bio includes a line about unlearning people-pleasing and money boundaries, which feels like an omen dressed as a business card. She texted me from the bus on the way home, "I don't want a boat. I want a Saturday where I'm not trying to prove I'm clever. I want to eat pasta and cake and not apologize." I told her I'd boil the water and asked if she wanted red sauce or pesto. She sent me a picture of the frosting smeared anchor and said, "Both. If there's going to be a wedding someday, it won't be a scavenger hunt. If there isn't, she will have a couch and a budget and a pair of shoes that don't make her seasick." Basil's decal, not a dime, ended up on the dumpster outside the marina, by the way. I know because the broker sent a mass email about vandalism and asked everyone to be mindful of signage. Maybe that's petty. Maybe it's a miracle. All I know is, the letters peeled a little at the corners in the drizzle and looked exactly like what they were, something that didn't stick. Update 4. Saturday looked like moving day got dressed up as a courtroom. We labeled his things the night before: shoebox handwriting on painter's tape, neutral nouns, sweaters, tools, miscellaneous cables, bathroom. Coral moved like someone who'd rehearsed for a fire drill, all the flammable feelings packed in a tote bag, breath in, breath out. Her sister queued up a playlist that somehow had both Lizzo and Chopin, which felt exactly right. I made coffee we didn't drink. He came early, of course, 9:42, a full 18 minutes of pressure head start, with his mother and a man he introduced as a neutral third party, which turned out to be his friend Drew, who once tried to tip a bartender with a Venmo request. Behind them, a patrol car idled in that boardway that says, "We are here because someone said the word civil." The officer rang the bell like what he wanted most in the world was for everyone to be normal for half an hour. Coral opened the door at exactly 10 anyway. "Between 10 and noon," she said, like the words had borders you could see. Basil started with charm he'd ironed too high and it crackled. "We can be adults," he said, glancing at the stack of boxes like they were props. His mother scanned the room and landed on the coffee machine. "That was a gift from us," she said, which it was not. Coral bought it with a coupon and a rebate and a victory dance in our group chat last year. The officer cleared his throat. "Folks, I'm just here to keep the peace," he said. "No adjudicating property." He said adjudicating like he didn't get to use it often. Basil gestured to the art on the wall, a print of a citrus grove Coral bought at a street fair for $10. "Ours," he said. Coral had a sleeve of plastic protectors on the table with receipts she'd pulled like rabbits from a hat. She slid one out and laid it on the wood. $10, cash, date scribbled by a teenager with a nose ring who'd drawn a tiny lemon where her signature should be. Basil's mouth did this twitch like his face couldn't decide which story to tell. They took what was his. Shirts. A box of chargers that looked like a nest. Sneakers with labels like boats, Air, Jordan, Fly. Drew tried to unscrew the TV mount because some men need to leave a wall with scars. Coral said, calmly, that came with the apartment, and the officer, who had taken to admiring our spider plant, said, "Buddy." Drew stopped mid-Allen key. Basil brought up the ring like someone who believes props can fix a plot hole. Coral said, equally calm, "It's at the jeweler," and then the piece he couldn't swallow, "You can pick it up when you pay for it." His mother's pearls actually clicked together when she turned her head. "It's common," she said. "People finance." "You're being ungracious." Coral didn't look at her. She looked at the officer and said, "Are we done at noon?" He looked at his watch and said, "Looks like we will be," and somehow we all took a breath at the same time. At 10:27 my phone buzzed with an email from HR flagged important. Basil had followed through on his promise/threat to loop in my employer. He'd sent my boss a paragraph about my sabotage, my defamation, and, somehow, my unhygienic influence, which made me set the phone down to laugh into my sleeve because what does that even mean? Am I a dirty spellcaster? My boss had replied with a single sentence that could have been framed: "We do not engage with personal disputes. Please refrain from contacting our employees again." I showed it to Coral and she smiled like a tiny, quiet pathway lit up inside her. "Basil, because the universe has timing like a sitcom sometimes," said in that same moment to the officer, "I'm the reasonable one here." Then came the registry. Basil's mother pulled a folded sheet from her tote like a summons. "We've had family making contributions," she said. There was a honey fund link printed at the top with a QR code and a header: "Our adventures." The tiers were named things like sunset sail and mooring fees and, "God help us, not a dime champagne." The copy below said, "In lieu of gifts, help us build equity in our future." Coral read it once and then, in a voice that could cut rope, said, "Turn it off. Today." Basil tried, "It's a honeymoon fund," and Coral didn't raise her voice. She said, "No one is paying for your boat. Not my aunt, not your dentist, not a stranger from a work happy hour." She grabbed her laptop, logged in with a password he thought she didn't know, and clicked through pages with the kind of focus you get after a fire. She refunded every cent still in the account, wrote 3 sentences that said, "We are no longer accepting contributions," and added a 4th sentence, "We are not getting married," that made Basil's mother say Coral's name like she'd bitten into a lemon and found a nail. Noon came. Basil dawdled like the last kid in a museum. He tried to take a plant, Coral pointed to the receipt sleeve and he detoured to a box marked cables, punishing nobody but future Basil who will have to untangle his way back to a charger. At 12:03 the officer said, "Time," with a tone that suggested he had sandwiches waiting somewhere else. Basil gathered what he could carry and then stood in the doorway looking like he wanted to pitch a monologue to a live studio audience. "You will regret this," he said, not even bothering to say please. Coral said nothing. He stepped into the hall. His mother tried to step back in for one more piece of air. Coral closed the door. She leaned her forehead against it for a second and then went to the kitchen and drank water like she hadn't in hours. We sat among the small bald patches where furniture had been and watched dust do its silly, hopeful dance in the window sun. Then she texted the jeweler to put a note in the file: "Release only when paid, ID required." The jeweler sent back a row of check marks and a tiny, perfect heart. Her first therapy appointment was the next morning in a little room with chairs that had arms you wanted to grip. The therapist had silver hair wound back with a pencil and the kind of soft sneakers that say I take long walks with complicated grief. Coral sat on the edge of the chair and said, "I have been so easy to move," and the therapist nodded like she'd been waiting for that sentence all day. She said, "People use your gentleness like a hallway. We're going to put up doors." Coral laughed, then cried, then did both at once in a way that looked like exhaling for the first time in a while. I waited in the lobby and read a pamphlet about boundaries that had watercolor leaves on it and tried not to memorize the part that said no as a complete sentence but then memorized it anyway. By afternoon, Coral had a lease in her email, a 1-bedroom across from a mechanic that does state inspections and sells keychains shaped like wrench heads. The apartment had a crooked hall and a window that looked over a parking lot with 3 puddles that always looked blue even when the sky was gray. The kitchen was a rectangle with a counter you would call gallant if you were generous. She loved it because it did not try to be anything but itself. We did the math on the rent on a napkin with the confidence of women who have learned to live and die by napkins. She clicked sign. Basil did one more round. An email at 11 p.m. Subject line, last offer. He proposed a reset, by which he meant a redo of the fight with him winning, and attached a photo of the ring box on his kitchen counter like proof of something. He said he'd talked to a mediator, name-dropping a man with a website that looked like it had been built in 2011 and never touched again. He said he would take responsibility for the miscommunications, which felt like watching someone apologize to a mirror. Coral didn't reply. She forwarded it to a folder labeled archive/ships. Sunday we took the cake, ugly enlisting and honest, and cut 2 slices with a butter knife because my sharp one was in the dishwasher. We ate it standing up. Then we brought the rest downstairs to my neighbor who collects license plates and has opinions about noise ordinances and, apparently, buttercream. He opened the door in socks and looked at the frosting anchor and said, "That's a message," which was exactly right. He took 2 plates and said, "That boy still circling?" And we said, "No," and he said, "Good," and shut the door like he'd been waiting to have the last word all week. Monday, Coral went to work in a sweater that made her look like she belonged to herself. Her boss waved her into a conference room and shut the door and said, "We don't need the details, we have your back," and the way Coral breathed out, I wanted to write a thank you note to the concept of decent management. She set up the new direct deposit to her Me account and did the small administrative ritual of reclaiming a life, changed her emergency contact, updated an address, deleted a calendar appointment titled dance lesson that had been sitting there like a ghost. At lunch, a florist called to confirm delivery for a date 6 months from now. Basil had scheduled centerpieces to appear at a venue that did not exist. Coral said, "No event," and the florist said, "I'll make sure you're not charged," and then, bless her, "Do you want a free bouquet anyway? We have 3 extra peonies about to give up." Coral laughed and said yes. We ate sandwiches at my table with peonies leaning over us in full, unnecessary bloom like they were translating sunlight into an apology on behalf of the universe. He tried one more thing I wouldn't have thought of, He sent a postcard to Coral's parents' house, glossy and thick, with a photo of a marina at sunset and a quote about building assets, like a vision board that licks stamps. Her mom called her and read it out loud in the voice you use for spam. Coral listened and then said, "We're done," and her mom said, "I know," and then, after a beat, "Do you need a casserole?" Coral said, "Yes," and we both cried in the produce all like idiots. And because the world isn't only men and their boats, there were small kindnesses. The broker, not ours, the one who'd kept smiling like a discount lighthouse, sent a mass email about their spring open house and snuck a line at the end that said, "Refund processed as requested. Good luck to you both," which I decided to take personally as a benediction. Lacey texted Coral a picture of her new helmet for a bike that doesn't vibrate like a wasp nest, and Coral sent back a photo of the peonies and a caption, "Flower confetti." We finished the day with pasta like we'd promised ourselves. 2 pots, red and pesto, because abundance can be small and still be abundance. We ate at my wobbly table with our knees knocking it into honesty. Coral twirled spaghetti and said, "He took his boxes and his stories," and then, quieter, "I didn't give him my life." She tapped the spreadsheet on her laptop, tabs like little flags, rent, therapy, groceries, flowers she will buy for herself in June. The last thing, as we were washing dishes, my phone pinged with a video from an unknown number. It was 30 seconds long, shot vertically, a boat sliding out of frame, somebody's laughter, the word asset cut off by wind. The number blocked 3 seconds later. I looked at Coral, she rolled her eyes so hard she almost fell backwards. "He's going to learn to live with returns," she said, flicking soap bubbles into the sink. "So am I." Then she wiped her hands on a towel and opened her calendar to a Saturday that used to have a circle around it and wrote 2 words in that little square, "Free day."